said I wasn't going to stop until I find out who did this to my daughter.
Never thought that I would be burying my daughter before she buries me.
Okay, do this.
That's exactly why I went and had the paper did.
Okay.
She woke up on a September morning, sent her mother a yellow smiley face, and walked out the door like she'd be back in a few hours because 20-year-old Kanya Brunson had no reason to believe she wouldn't. But that "I'm okay" text would become the last proof her family ever received. Later that day, inside a parked car in Milwaukee, a witness saw something that didn't make sense. A man climbing on top of her, and then the screaming started. "He cut my throat." A 911 call was made while she was still alive, still begging for help. But when police arrived, the car was gone. Kanya was gone, and hours later, they would find her, in a condition that raised more questions than answers. Meanwhile, her mother kept staring at that last message, a bright yellow smiley face that looked so normal, while something unthinkable was already unfolding. So here's the question: if someone saw it happen and someone called for help, what happened in those missing moments? This is the story of 20-year-old Kanya Brunson, a warm, ambitious young woman whose promising life was tragically cut short. Kanya Brunson was only 20 years old, a young woman known for her warmth, ambition, and the way she naturally drew people in. She was close to her family, especially her mother, who considered her not just a daughter, but a best friend. Kanya had big plans for her future. She was working toward becoming a certified nursing assistant and also exploring a path in cosmetology, while still holding on to dreams that could have taken her even further. Friends and relatives remember her as driven, gentle, and full of energy. In September 2022, that promising life took a devastating turn. On what seemed like an ordinary day, Kanya left home and sent her mother a brief, cheerful message that gave no hint of what was coming. Soon after, she vanished from contact. Her car was later discovered sitting abandoned, raising immediate concern. Within hours, authorities found her body in a Milwaukee alley. Investigators soon uncovered a troubling connection to a man who had been part of her life, older, married, and hiding a relationship that complicated everything around him. As the case unfolded, it emerged that Kanya had begun to realize the truth about his double life and was preparing to expose it. That realization appeared to escalate tensions between them. Evidence from surveillance footage and statements gathered during the investigation began to contradict the version of events initially presented by him and his wife, gradually exposing inconsistencies in their accounts. Witnesses also reported hearing a disturbing altercation in the area around the time of the incident, suggesting a sudden and violent confrontation. As more details came to light, investigators pieced together a picture of betrayal and manipulation centered on a relationship built in secrecy and control. Kanya Brunson was just 20, but she already stood out as someone with direction, empathy, and a natural ability to connect with people. She grew up with wide-ranging dreams, at one point picturing herself working in orthodontics, and at another considering veterinary medicine because of her love for animals and her instinct to care for others. Over time, those interests evolved into something more hands-on and personal. She found herself drawn to beauty work, where she could help people feel more confident in their own skin. That path led her into cosmetology school, where she fully committed herself to learning the craft. People around her later recalled how she would casually share tips, help friends with makeup details or perfect small beauty routines, always adding her own thoughtful touch. Alongside that passion, she also planned to pursue certification as a nursing assistant. For Kanya, it wasn't about choosing one direction. It was about building a life centered on care, service, and making a real difference in people's everyday lives. Her family often spoke about how grounded and loving she was. Her mother, Jennifer, expressed a grief no parent is prepared for, saying she never imagined having to say goodbye to her daughter so soon. Her stepfather remembered her laughter as something that could lift the mood of an entire room, while her father admired her focus and persistence. Her grandmother described her as unforgettable, someone whose presence naturally filled a space. But behind that outward brightness, Kanya had become involved in a relationship she kept largely private. It centered on Sultan Sharif, a man in his early 50s who was already married and living a separate family life. Their connection had started years earlier when Kanya was still a teenager, and over time it developed into something she saw as meaningful and personal. For her, it carried emotional weight and trust. For him, it existed alongside a carefully maintained double life that he worked to keep from those closest to him. From the outside, Sultan appeared to be a committed husband with established responsibilities. In Kanya's world, however, he held a different place, one shaped by secrecy and familiarity. The imbalance between them was clear. He brought age, experience, and control over the narrative, while she brought trust, hope, and emotional investment that deepened over time. As the secrecy around the relationship tightened, so did the pressure surrounding it. About a week before Kanya's death, Sultan reached out directly to her mother in an attempt to control the situation. During that call, he insisted he wanted distance from Kanya and claimed he no longer intended to continue the relationship.
He goes on to say, I want to be done messing with your daughter, but she's reaching out to my wife.
But the motivation behind his words wasn't remorse, it was panic. By that point, Kanya had begun contacting his wife, and that single move shifted everything. It broke through the careful separation Sultan had maintained between his public life and his hidden one. The illusion he had built started to collapse, and Kanya, unintentionally or not, had become the catalyst. From his perspective, the situation was no longer manageable. The secrecy that once protected him was now exposed, and his fear of consequences intensified. What may have felt like an act of honesty or self-protection for Kanya instead escalated the danger around her. She was no longer just part of a hidden relationship. She had disrupted it, and in doing so, she placed herself at the center of a situation that was rapidly turning unstable. As tensions rose, responsibility gave way to control, and control gave way to desperation. On September 24th, 2022, Kanya Brunson started her day like any other in Milwaukee. Before leaving home, she sent her mother a brief, light-hearted message, a small gesture that carried no warning of what lay ahead. She was headed to meet Sultan Sharif, the man she had been connected to for years in secrecy. Shortly after their meeting, a person familiar with Sultan reported witnessing a disturbing scene from a distance involving the two inside a vehicle. The situation appeared urgent, and a call was immediately made to emergency services, with the witness relaying what they believed they had seen and heard, including a plea for help. When authorities rushed to the area, they were unable to locate either of them. In that short window of time, Kanya had already disappeared, and the urgency of the response came too late to change the outcome. Hours later, investigators located Kanya's remains in an alley near Keefe Avenue and Palmer Street. What they encountered confirmed their worst fears. She had been restrained, shot, and then her body was deliberately burned in an apparent attempt to conceal what had taken place and destroy any remaining evidence. The level of violence pointed to an effort not just to kill, but to completely erase the aftermath. In a single day, a 20-year-old life full of promise ended, leaving behind a scene that would haunt those who responded and a family left in unbearable shock. News of the discovery quickly reached the public as Milwaukee authorities opened an active investigation into what they described as a suspicious death in the Harambe area near Palmer and Keefe. Officials confirmed the fatal outcome, while early reports filtered through emergency dispatch updates and local coverage, marking the beginning of a rapidly unfolding homicide investigation.
Police say they found her body near North Palmer. Her father tells me her abandoned car was found about a mile away from here.
As detectives began building the timeline, they immediately focused on people within Kanya's close circle, especially Sultan Sharif. At first, his wife attempted to support his account, telling investigators he had been with her during the critical hours in question. But that version of events did not hold up under scrutiny. Investigators began piecing together digital evidence, including surveillance footage and phone activity, while also retracing movements across key locations. As those records came in, contradictions emerged. Video placements placed Sultan away from where he claimed to be, directly challenging the alibi that had initially been offered on his behalf. What followed was a consistent pattern of inconsistencies. Statements shifted, details didn't align, and each layer of explanation seemed designed to distance him from the crime scene. While he attempted to present himself as uninvolved, the emerging evidence painted a very different picture, one shaped by surveillance, witness accounts, and behavioral clues that suggested panic and evasion rather than innocence. According to the criminal complaint, Kanya spent the morning of September 24, 2022 with 50-year-old Sultan Sharif. Investigators believe that later that same day he carried out the killing. The filing also states that 45-year-old Johnny Hopgood assisted Sharif afterward by helping burn the body in an attempt to destroy evidence and delay identification. From the outset, investigators viewed the case as more than an act of violence. It reflected a pattern of secrecy, manipulation. Sharif had maintained a hidden relationship for years, balancing two separate lives. When Kanya began pushing that secrecy toward exposure, detectives believe it triggered a shift that ended in irreversible consequences. Afterward, attention turned to containment, pulling others into the aftermath and attempting to shape a version of events that would not hold up under scrutiny. But as investigators dug deeper, the narrative began to fracture. A 911 call placed by someone within Sharif's circle, combined with surveillance footage tracking key movements and conflicting statements from those involved, created a timeline that did not align with the explanations being offered. Each new piece of evidence added pressure to an already unstable story. By October 2022, our prosecutors determined they had built sufficient evidence to move forward with formal charges. Sharif was charged with first-degree intentional homicide along with mutilating a corpse, reflecting the severity of the allegations. Hopgood was also charged in connection with the aftermath, facing accusations of helping conceal the crime and assisting a felon. What started as a hidden relationship had expanded into a broader case involving multiple people and competing accounts. For Kanya's family, the legal progress marked movement toward accountability, but it did little to ease the emotional weight they carried. Court proceedings and media updates repeatedly reopened the same wound, reminding them of the absence at the center of their lives. Her mother later expressed that while justice was being pursued, the pain remained constant.
She was everything to me. She was everything. And this is the most hurtful feeling. And they think that they're going to be out here and live their normal life after they...
And the loss felt impossible to truly process. Loved ones came together and shared grief for 20-year-old Kanya Brunson, gathering to mourn a life that ended far too soon. Those closest to Kanya remembered her as someone who could shift the energy of any room just by being in it. Her father spoke about her drive and focus, noting that she had recently enrolled in CNA classes and was actively working toward a future built on helping others. He described her as ambitious, someone who stayed connected to the people she cared about and constantly pushed toward bigger goals. Her life had been filled with plans that were still in motion. In the days that followed, small tributes began appearing, including flowers left in her memory by people who never even knew her personally, a quiet reflection of how deeply her story had resonated beyond her immediate circle. Her mother also spoke through her grief, struggling with the thought that Kanya had faced her final moments without the presence of those who loved her most. She made it clear she would not step back until the truth behind her daughter's death was fully uncovered. Despite the overwhelming pain, Kanya's family refused to withdraw from the process. They continued attending court hearings, speaking her name openly, and pushing for accountability at every stage. Their focus remained fixed on ensuring that the person responsible would be held fully answerable even as they carried the weight of their loss every day. In the months following Kanya Brunson's murder, Milwaukee continued to feel the impact of what had happened. The case stayed in the public conversation, but it was the visible grief of her family that made the loss feel immediate and deeply personal to many in the community. As the first anniversary approached, loved ones gathered once again to honor her life. During the vigil, balloons were released into the night sky, each one symbolizing a memory, a prayer, or an unanswered hope for justice.
We love you,
For those who knew Kanya, the gathering wasn't just about remembrance, it was about holding on to her presence in a world that still felt incomplete without her. While investigators noted that the case remained active with the accused awaiting trial. At the vigil itself, emotions ran high as supporters stood together, sharing words of comfort and acknowledging the ongoing search for resolution.
Today, I'm still feeling the same grief. Our family's still feeling the same grief.
Until I know the complete sentence on what they did to my daughter. So until that judge hit the gavel, I won't feel like justice is served.
Even in grief, there was a shared belief that Kanya's presence remained with them in some form. Her family described the pain as unchanged, saying that time had not softened the loss. They spoke about how every day still carried the same weight, especially as they continued waiting for the legal process to run its course. For them, closure remained tied to the courtroom, and they made it clear they intended to be present for every step leading up to trial. Even in the midst of that waiting, they leaned on each other for strength. Relatives and close friends surrounded them, offering support that helped them endure the long stretch of uncertainty. The trial ahead represented not only accountability, but a moment they were determined not to miss. At the center of their memories was Kanya herself, remembered as a daughter, a confidant, and someone whose absence left a permanent gap in their lives. Her mother held tightly to those memories, while her father spoke with a quiet resolve shaped by loss, promising he would never allow another family to endure the same kind of pain. The vigil carried both sorrow and resilience. Those gathered spoke about her laughter, her kindness, and the goals she was still working toward. Together, they committed to keeping her memory alive, not defined by the way her life ended, but by the brightness she brought while she was here. Before Sultan Sharif ever appeared in front of a jury, the case against his alleged accomplice took an unexpected direction. In June 2023, Johnny Allen Hopgood, Sharif's brother-in-law, faced the court for his role in the aftermath of Kanya Brunson's death. He had originally been charged with serious offenses, including helping conceal the crime and the mutilation of a body, allegations that connected him directly to the effort to cover up what investigators described as a brutal killing. But instead of proceeding to trial on those original charges, Hopgood reached a plea agreement. He admitted guilt only to resisting and obstructing law enforcement. In court records reflect the shift clearly. Charges that once carried heavy implications were reduced to a far lesser conviction through the deal reached with prosecutors. For Kanya's family, the outcome landed as a painful disappointment. They were still processing the reality of what had been done to her, while the legal result for someone tied to the aftermath felt disconnected from the seriousness of the case. To them, it seemed like accountability had been diluted, especially when measured against the violence and destruction involved. The contrast in outcomes only deepened the emotional weight they were already carrying. While one defendant still faced the full force of a homicide case, another walked away with consequences that felt comparatively minimal, leaving the family struggling to reconcile justice in theory with justice in practice. Then in December 2023, the main trial finally reached its conclusion. A Milwaukee jury found Sultan Sharif guilty of first-degree intentional homicide along with mutilation of a corpse, both as part of the same criminal conduct. The decision was unanimous, marking a definitive legal conclusion, that placed responsibility for Kanya's death directly on him. Several months later, in February 2024, the court delivered sentencing. Sharif received life in prison plus an additional 12 years tied to the mutilation charge. The punishment ensured he would remain incarcerated for the rest of his life, reflecting the severity of the crimes as defined by the court. For Kanya's family, the outcome brought accountability, but it did not bring closure. The legal resolution could not undo what had happened or quiet the memory of how their daughter's life ended. Her mother's earlier words continued to echo through their grief, a reminder of a future permanently taken from them. What the verdict did establish, however, was a final legal record of responsibility, one that exposed the extent of the deception and secured Sharif's place behind bars for life. In the months that followed the trial, Kanya Brunson's family slowly tried to rebuild some sense of normal life, even though the absence of her presence never eased. Her mother spoke openly about the depth of her loss, describing Kanya as the center of her world and admitting that the pain remained overwhelming. Her stepfather held on to memories of her laughter, while her father reflected on her drive and ambition. Together, they all carried the same reality. The space she left behind could never truly be filled. Outside her family, the impact also lingered within the community. People continued to remember her as a young woman full of energy and promise, someone whose life ended just as it was beginning to take shape. Her absence became a lasting reminder of how quickly a future can be taken away. Over time, Kanya's story also came to represent something larger than a single case. It highlighted the dangers that can exist in hidden relationships, especially where imbalance, secrecy, and control are involved. It also raised difficult questions about how vulnerable individuals can be left exposed to harm when warning signs go unnoticed or unaddressed. Her case drew attention beyond local headlines, including coverage in spaces that focused on overlooked victims, helping ensure her story remained visible rather than fading into silence. While the court process reached its conclusion with a life sentence for Sultan Sharif, the outcome could not repair what had been lost. In the end, Kanya's memory continued to carry meaning beyond the case itself. She remained a daughter, a sister, and a friend remembered for her laughter, her goals, and the way she connected with others. Her story stands as a reminder of how fragile life can be and how important it is to recognize the signs that are too often missed. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to raise awareness and help keep her story alive.